This morning I'm with County Commission Chairman and Probate Judge David Money, County Administrator Ronnie Dollar, and County Commissioner Jason Hudspeth. And I want to talk to you a little bit about the ambulance stuff. I wrote an article last week that Ronnie said it didn't have anything right in it, and a lot of people have been hammering me about the funding and the funding for the ambulances and hearing that may be going out of state. And let's clear it up, and if y'all would just kind of tell me what's going on with the funding for Headland and for Abbeville and or Hellberg. I know Hellberg is strictly 100% volunteer, so they fall in a different category than the other two, but what's happening on EMS?
You want to start? Let me say a couple of things, and if correct me if I leave something out. The purpose in this is to correct some information that's not correct. It's misleading information. The intent is not to debate or get in a real conversation with you. It's simply to make sure that people know what the truth is about the EMS. And you're exactly right when you say that there's an issue with EMS in Henry County. Headland has a quality EMS service. Abbeville sometimes does. And that's not knocking anybody, that's just being honest. There's one ambulance in Abbeville. There's times that there's nobody to respond in Abbeville. Simply if the Abbeville ambulance is in Dothan and Headland has to respond, that's really not an appropriate response to an emergency in Shorterville or up on the lake. We get that. I have fought to help to do something to correct that. I'll start with the May meeting when the first time that there was anything on the agenda about funding EMS. There had been some meetings between a group that had talked about trying to figure out a way to correct something. It went this way and it went that way. Nothing ever got settled. I had talked to the city clerk and I had talked to the mayor, and they come up with a number of about three.
No, correct. City clerk in Abbeville or Headland?
Abbeville. Jimmy
okay.
Money and Melissa from Abbeville. They'd come up with a number of about 350. They have 3 ambulances, only one is in operation. That would staff an additional crew to respond primarily in the county. Well, that was not intended that day to take anything away from Headland. In my mind, that was the fastest way to start fixing something in a hurry. That's way more than what we have right now. Another ambulance and another crew that responds to any emergency on the north end of the county is just a overnight really improvement. Well, that was the sole purpose in that being on the agenda, was to get something started. Was not to take away from Headland, was not to pay Headland at some point, but that was just a fast way to get something going. Well, as you know, Headland was in opposition of that. Maybe we didn't do a good enough job informing them of where that was headed to and what the purpose in that was. It was tabled that day. The committee decided to go back to the table and start meeting. Well, in your article, you indicate that there was an agreement made. The Henry County Commission has never voted to fund anything EMS. You want the truth? That's the truth. They never have. What happened after some talk happened over and over, it never seemed to come to anything. I called Jason and said, let's go to the city of Abbeville, get them to tell us what it's costing them, what it would cost them to run a second crew. Let's start all over with that. Let's go to Headland and see what it'll cost to run a second crew. Well, we first talked to Mayor Money and the city clerk. They were going to get numbers together. We went to Headland and talked to the mayor and Heather. They come up with numbers pretty fast. Well, as we continued to deal with Abbeville, we started finding out that they were not sure who we needed to be negotiating with. Abbeville City pays part of a salary, 1 or 2 salaries. The rescue squad, who is a totally separate operation, pays some salaries. So who do we create a contract with? Because if we're going to spend county money, ARPA money, there's procedures and ways that it has to be spent to keep people out of trouble. And that was the purpose, was to come up with an agreement, a binding agreement that said, okay, this is what we're getting out of this money we spend. Well, they started back and forth, Abbeville and the rescue, to try to figure out what to do. Their intent, my understanding was, the city of Abbeville was going to take it from them. I also understand they've had some called meetings. Now, we can't create an agreement with anybody that we don't know and can't hold accountable for the money that we give to them. They've had called meetings, they've had discussions. At one point, it was my understanding they didn't want anything to do with the county being a part of theirs. And about 2 weeks ago, Judge Money come in one morning and told me that he had heard that they've been talking to a private company. Now, that's the first knowledge of any.
They would have been Abbeville? Okay.
Had talked to a private company. I didn't know anything other than that. Never in my life had I heard the name AmeriPro until I walked over and talked to Melissa. And I asked Melissa, I hear that you're talking to a private company, because if we're going to work out something with somebody, we got to know where it's going to. She said, yes, we have talked to AmeriPro. At that point, I didn't even know that he worked for AmeriPro. At some point within the next few days, I seen him standing outside of the fire department. I pulled up. I said, Justin, have you heard anything about the city of Abbeville talking to AmeriPro? And he said, yes. And that's when I learned that he was doing some work. I have never met with anybody from AmeriPro, and it's my understanding Jason has never met with anybody concerning Henry County being a part of a private ambulance service. I don't have a scheduled meeting with anybody from AmeriPro. I don't think Jason has a scheduled meeting with anybody from AmeriPro. I know nothing about AmeriPro other than the city of Abbeville has talked with them. We have, it may come a day that we need to talk to AmeriPro. If that's where they go to, outside of us just going out on our own and creating an ambulance service, that would be the only option we had. The goal and the purpose, Ricky, is for us to provide EMS service to the people that deserve it. I've been around this business long enough to know when it's better, when it's done right, when there's a paramedic on the back of the ambulance and it gets there in just a minute or two when they're needed. There are times that it's 30 minutes before an ambulance can get to a house. I would do nothing that interfere in us improving that. We should be ashamed that we don't already have that. Your biting at us all the time does absolutely nothing, because I'm taking a lead role in saying, let's do something. And I say this, in my mind, and this is my personal response to this, the state is about to spend billions of dollars to get internet to the children out in the rural areas. In Henry County, if there's a child choking, we can't get a damn ambulance to them in time to save them. Now, that's a shame.
I agree.
That's my stance for EMS. So you can write whatever you want to write about Ronnie Dollar. And you're exactly right. I live in Barber County. You're right. My wife was given family property. Well, if we're going to base our opinions and the way that people do their jobs on that, some of the major decisions in this county and that courthouse are made by people that live in Houston County. The Eufaula fire chief wakes up in Abbeville, Alabama every morning and drives to Eufaula. Jason Hudspeth lives in Henry County, Alabama, but he drives to Georgia and rides on an ambulance. At a commission meeting last week, there was 2 guys that work for the Houston County Commission that lives in Henry County.
Works for the Houston County Commission or the Sheriff's Office?
Houston County Commission, and they live in Henry County. That has absolutely no effect. There is nobody in this county that wants and desires a better EMS service in this county than I do. I've seen it both ways. I've seen it bad and I've seen it good. And I'm telling you, it's bad. North end of the county. Headland, I'm not, don't take it wrong. It is bad up here. These people really don't have a valid EMS service most of the time. Occasionally you can get a crew together that does a good job. Most of the time they don't. And I'm as passionate about that as I can be. So the fact that I live in Barber County means diddly doo-doo. Means nothing. And I live there because of the way circumstances have worked out. And I grew up there. The point is, we need to get EMS service for these people. However that works out.
Now, had this been on the agenda for several months and kept getting tabled, and was it on the agenda to fund Headland and Abbeville, or it was on the agenda for what you said about Abbeville?
It's been on the agenda to fund both of them.
Both of them. And it's been tabled for months and months.
It has been tabled because we've not been able to work anything out with Abbeville. And the commission would vote on something today that was presented to them that was appropriate. Today, they'd call a special meeting and vote on it. Every one of them are ready to do something. And one thing I left out, Mr. Beasley said at the last meeting, it was not to create anybody's subcommittee. It was simply to say, can we get both cities together and meet and talk? Simply, that's all he said.
Now, hadn't both cities met with you, both mayors, Jimmy and...
It's been several weeks. Initially, when it was on the agenda, it was to solve the immediate problem in Abbeville when we found out that oftentimes there was not an ambulance available. So we said, what can we do on an emergency basis? Let me go back a few years. When I was elected, and you probably know this, sometimes there's been a disconnect between Abbeville and Headland through the years,
right,
through decades. One of the many things I wanted to do when I was elected was begin to unify Henry County. We've made some major steps, government, education, some other things. I've been really careful to try to not recommend something that's good for one town without doing something for the other town. That was an immediate need in Abbeville. That was on there worded like that for one time. And then we said, okay, we've got some ARPA funding. Let's decide how much we can commit to EMS. I agree with Ronnie, Headland has an outstanding. Abbeville in years has had. When I was mayor, it was all volunteer. Those days are gone. You have to pay people. Now, very few folks want to volunteer. We decided we would look at several numbers of ARPA money that we would devote to EMS. It ranged from $500,000 to $700,000, and we're committed to doing that. With ARPA, whomever we write a check to becomes a sub-grantee. They are responsible for spending that money in a way that meets the standards set forth by the federal government. If you don't, heads will fall. We want it to be right. There's also a period after I leave office, after some of the leave office, that we're still accountable. So we are very careful to make sure no issue at all writing a check quarterly, or what we decide to do to the city of Headland as a municipality. No issue writing it to the city of Abbeville. But the mayor's told me time and again that they haven't gotten together yet. We can, in good faith, write one to Abbeville Rescue or Hellberg Rescue. We're going to work through the two cities and try to develop a plan. Again, I live in town. In fact, I live in Headland. I'm concerned about immediate response in town. But our major concern is immediate response to those outlying areas. So what we're trying to do, and I have asked, the mayor's kin to me, we're good friends, we get along well. But I've asked him numerous times
about the mayor. You're talking about Mayor
money, yes.
Okay.
Let's get this settled so we can do this. And the first I heard of an outside agency in Georgia was, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. He mentioned that they were looking at that. I've not heard until somebody said it was in your article that even Jason was working with them. I had no idea. I am ready, and my plan is this week to get up with the county attorney and tell him to draw up a contract between Henry County Commission, City of Headland, Henry County Commission, City of Abbeville. Spell out the things we expect for the money we donate. Now, I've heard some flack even from our commission that we want to make this through the end of 2024. And there's a reason for that. I would not leave here with a huge obligation for the next administration. I would think the next administration would pick right up and continue to fund it. But I can't say we're gonna donate X money every year from now on. So that's the reason that I've put a timeline. That's the day I leave office. It's 2 more years. We want it done. Ronnie worded it right. That is a high priority for us. I'm not asking Ronnie to run everything. People don't understand. I'm one of the 12 or so dual role judges in the state. And if you're gonna do this job right, it's a 50, 60-hour work week. I was up here yesterday, 6 hours. There's probate and there's commission. So I need good help on both sides. So, that's where we are. We're committed to it. I will ask Mr. Danzy to get the contract ready. And I will talk with Mr. Money too, Mayor Money, that if this thing isn't ready, I am ready to write the check to the city of Headland. We still have not agreed on a figure. That's something we'll discuss as a commission. There are other needs, broadband, the jail's in terrible shape. We've got to put money there.
And grand jury
Roads,
report cited
everything.
Right.
So it's not like we can take all of this money and put it EMS. A large sum of it will go EMS because it's important. It's life and death sometimes.
I'm not trying to compare Houston County to Henry County at all in this statement, but Houston County took out of the general fund and is providing for fire and EMS because of the ARPA restrictions. Have y'all thought about doing
Yes, we're on the way to doing that.
Okay.
We're gonna take some of the ARPA money, put it toward the jail because it's less restricted that way. We're gonna take a good bit of general fund money and put it to EMS. It will be a combination. It may end up where all of the money to EMS comes from the general fund. It's all our money. We just have to spend it the best
Careful what
way, be
restrictions,
legal, and meet the needs that are most urgent.
So regardless if Abbeville gets their problem straightened out, you're prepared to go ahead and contract with it?
I am, as a non-voting member of that commission.
Right.
It will be up to the county commission to do that, but I want the city of Abbeville to understand, it's not our choice to write a check to Headland and not write one to Abbeville at the same time.
They just
We
gotta
have-
get it straight
We
what
have to
they're
have
gonna do.
contracts signed
Right.
by Headland and by Abbeville, and we're looking at the 2 municipalities because they meet the criteria set forth by the federal government on ARPA funding. And the same really applies to the general fund. We're responsible, we have to spend it the right way.
And I agree with Ronnie on the distance and the amount of time it takes, because I listen to radios more than anybody, and oftentimes I hear Headland having to go to White Oak to a medical call because there's no ambulances available.
We very much appreciate that. Headland
Right.
has been a good friend, and that is the part of continuing to work together. I'm hopeful that when we get this thing straight, that if there's an emergency at McKay's store, that Abbeville is right down there with them, and I think they will be.
Right.
The truth is about that though, Ricky, not often do we have a real emergency. They're rare. That's life or death. You gotta get there or somebody's gonna die. Well, if the ambulance has to come from Headland and it is that real emergency, they're dead when they get there. That's been my point all along. That was my point on the May meeting, was let's get something here close by to get started with. Was not to offend anybody, but to say the fastest and the best move we can make is to get one live. That you have two, one dedicated to going to those people out there that need it. We should have that. We should stop spinning our tires and put that in place. And I'm one last thing, and I'm fixing to stop. If somebody walks up to you, like it happens all the time, and they create this crowd about they're doing this or they're doing that, call me. I'll fix that. I'm gonna tell you the truth. I got no reason to lie to you or
I make
anybody
an
else.
allegation, I will call you, okay? Where in the past, sometimes I've not called you. This came up because of what came up at the county commission meeting the other day with Commissioner Beasley and
But there was about that much of that story true. It was all bogus, it was misleading, and it was false information. If you would have called and you would have said, hey, I hear this or I hear that, I'm gonna tell you the truth, Ricky. You may not like me, but I'm gonna tell you the truth about it. So don't, you create issues in the community with that kind of crowd.
Well, just for your information, I talked to the mayor, so the purpose of this is not to debate the article. I will, but what you're saying is wrong, some of them are saying was right. So I get caught in the situation of who's right and who's wrong.
I will show you a there's not a document signed by both mayors. There's not one.
It was one of the last things that was brought up in commission. Commissioner Beasley brought it up and wanted to know why we continue at the table, so I tried to explain that. Now, I'm gonna put some of the blame on Commissioner Hudspeth. Commissioner Hudspeth was appointed to the E911 board. He wanted to serve. That's his field of work. When we saw this happening and we were getting delays with the city of Abbeville working internally to decide whom we needed to write the check to, I asked Commissioner Hudspeth to begin to be the point of contact for the commission with the mayor, with the rescue squad, and help it get, well, every month, nothing would happen, so it had to be tabled again. And we all got tired of tabling it. So at this last meeting, when Commissioner Beasley brought it up, I saw no need for 5 commissioners, which is a public meeting, and 40 folks in a room to solve a problem that's nothing to do with the south end. It's all up here. So I told the subcommittee that I'm hearing you said was Commissioner Beasley, because he brought it up, and Commissioner Hudspeth, because he's been the point of contact for this, and you can have 2 commissioners meeting without it being a public meeting. I said, y'all meet with the mayor, with the rescue squad up here, whomever it is, and if you need me to meet with them or Ronnie to meet with them, I'll be glad to. I saw no need to have a big public hearing. That will come at some point if it needs it. I have no problem with that.
Commissioner Hudspeth, what's been your biggest obstacle to solving this?
Everyone not being able to come together for the same goal. Misleading information, the gossip game.
What is the misleading information you keep talking about?
The city has been told that the funding would stop in 2024
City.
of Abbeville.
Okay.
As
Jimmy Money has never mentioned that to me, and I think you need to make it clear that this contract would be through the last day of the year in 24. That does not at all mean we're gonna stop funding.
Right.
You should be a part of that commission. You've just been reelected. It'll be up to 5 commissioners. And I don't see a way in the world they're gonna cut off funding to EMS after that. I just don't wanna commit the city beyond my tenure here,
Right.
or the county.
The goal is every 2 years come back and reevaluate and do whatever it takes to sustain help with the funding from now on. I work in EMS. I continue to work in EMS. We're in a situation to where nobody in this county can do it alone. Everyone's gonna have to come together, gonna have to work towards the same goal. It's the only way we're gonna provide a service to the citizens that they deserve and need. We've got some of the best personnel that you can ask for, and they're working themselves to death to try to cover every call because of the lack of ambulances. It don't only affect Abbeville by having one ambulance. When Headland has to come to Abbeville, that's affecting the Headland area also when they get additional calls. So putting an additional ambulance in Abbeville and keeping it there, it's gonna help the whole county as a whole. The reason the recommendation was made for all parties to meet though was absolutely that. After talking to some of the city councilmen, they fear that the county's gonna help for 2 years, turn their backs on them, and then they're gonna be stuck flipping the bill that nobody can afford alone, which is absolutely not the case, not the plan, not the goal.
That would be the quickest way for a county commissioner to not get reelected if they cut off funding to EMS. One other thing, and I've got a hearing, and the attorney's already here. The ultimate goal is to have enough money available through the 2 cities and the county to try to structure this thing where there's not a situation where Headland's paying more, so Abbeville leaves to go to Headland, or Headland comes to Abbeville. We want to try to get salaries. They're all underpaid. I understand that, just like sheriff's officers are underpaid, although we've made that better. But to get it to a point where they're content, we're pretty much on the same fee structure. Headland did not probably need the money as much as Abbeville did right now, but would help them get their salaries to where they need to be. We're all for that. We just have to manage and look at the big picture and know that there are other things out there other than EMS, although right now EMS is the most important thing.
Right.
But I've got to go.
I have one question
Sure.
before you leave. When Matt Hatcher was made with emergency management, and emergency services is my passion, okay? And I don't think anybody can dispute that I have a favor for emergency services, and I thought, that's great for the north end of the county during the day when he's on duty, because you got a full-fledged paramedic that can jump and run until the ambulance gets there and start providing care. Or a lot of times you have basics on the ambulance and not a paramedic, so you got a paramedic available that can start pushing drugs, start doing your advanced life care. Because y'all don't have a hospital here. You either gotta go to Dothan, you gotta go to Eufaula. Has there been any discussion about kind of utilizing that resource for rapid response?
Absolutely, there has.
Initially, that was the first thing we talked about, was Matt would be available on the Abbeville end during the day. Go ahead, Ronnie.
We felt the very same way, that was huge. If we had 2 ambulances ready to go in Abbeville, and he around when he's up here, that's night and day from where we are right now. Absolutely, it just puzzles me that we can't get there. It just knocks me out of the chair that we can't get there with those simple little things.
Is it personalities that stops it?
Right now, it's organization and
right now it's Abbeville and Abbeville Rescue that we can't. We in the commission, if would today, I believe, if Abbeville would say if you'll staff this ambulance, we'll put it into operation. If they would say that, they'd give us that number, the county commission would pay it right now.
But you don't know who's in charge of Abbeville, because I guess it's a 501c3.
That's right.
With the rescue, and then
Well,
it's the city of
And
Abbeville.
if we send the money to the city of Abbeville and they turn around and give it to them, and the money is not used like it needs to, and if any of it's especially ARPA funds, then, we're at fault, and we've
Right.
got to make sure it's used correctly.
You're exactly right. ARPA funds has some federal regulations and guidance that has to be followed. But the general everyday money that belongs to the people of Henry County has to be spent right too. If we sign a contract and we pay them with that money, we expect that money to be used in the way it's intended to be used. So we have to have an agreement in writing with them that says we will. If we could put an ambulance there that's primary responsibility is to go out in the county. Not that it can't go to that car wreck on the 4-lane and help, but it's primary. That's that first one that goes. If they're both sitting there, this one goes to Shorterville if it needs it. I sometimes wonder, what are we thinking? What's so hard about putting that in place? The county would pay the salaries of at least 2 people to be on that, and to pay a salary that's competitive with other people, because like I do, in order for us to get a paramedic to come to Abbeville, he's going to probably be trained in Dothan, or he's probably going to be trained in Eufaula. So we've got to entice him to come and work part-time in Abbeville. We cannot get to the point, and I don't mean to be throwing Abbeville under the bus, and they're going to get mad at me, and I know that. But
Which the mayor told me they hadn't gotten all their stuff together, so defending you, Mayor Money did tell me they hadn't got everything together.
We can't get to the point of being able to say, okay, let's get the salary for paramedics to a certain amount that will draw somebody. These guys are not going to work for minimum wage on their off time. We got to accept that and understand, but we need to get there. Whatever that is, we need to be there. We should have been there already. If we would have acted in May, we'd already be there. The government don't act fast. It don't work fast. It drives me crazy. We need to get an ambulance to the people in the county today, and we don't have that. Now that's my stance. Whatever you write, however you say it, that's how I feel about
this. This is y'all saying it, so that's the reason I did the video.
And it probably wouldn't hurt you to talk with others too.
Right.
And I know they're trying. I know they want to do it. We're going to be ready to start funding somebody. We have to do it officially on the January 10th meeting probably. Well, I know we will, but we're going to be ready to write some checks in January. Now, I hope we can do it quarterly and not every month, just quarterly. We'll come up with a lump sum and figure out how it will be distributed and get it going. But they need to be getting ready to utilize that money just as soon as it gets there. So, attorneys make more than anybody in this room, and they're now with their clock running, so I've got to go.
Thank you, Judge. I appreciate that.
All right.
I'm going to ask this question. Somebody's got to be in charge. Somebody's got to be in charge of your emergency operations for the county and making sure it's running right. some fool in Alabama named emergency management. I don't know what fool named it, because it's not one emergency management plays solitaire. One emergency management in the state actually gets out and does something. One emergency management's on Geritol. One emergency management in Alabama actually does something. Y'all have an opportunity with a medical expertise. I've not talked to Matt Hatcher. This isn't a message from Matt. This is Ricky Stokes outside looking in, that helps manage the ambulances and what's going on. Are they answering calls? Are they handling their business? And most importantly, because it really ticks me off when I hear mutual aid called and the ambulance and mutual aid never meet. And it's harder to get a paramedic than it is to get a basic. Have y'all thought about kind of combining, and that EMA kind of is overseeing the ambulances out in the county and making sure the calls are being handled and the proper things are being done?
Honestly, we've explored most all options, bringing both cities' departments under one umbrella. As usual, personal agenda gets involved.
And you got the Hatfields and McCoys being Headland and Abbeville.
Exactly. And that stalls a lot of process in the county, including EMS.
There has been conversations about Matt, either whether it be in Abbeville or whether it be wherever. The first thing people do, this is my jurisdiction, my area, stay away from me. Well, we all feel that way to some degree. But back to your EMA thing. Well, I get what you say. I understand exactly how EMA is set up. It's not by law designed to be a first responding agency. It's just not. So when Matt and I talked about him responding to an emergency, I've told him, be careful. You do not really have lawful authority to be running lights and siren to anything representing EMA. Don't get yourself in a position where you run over somebody and get hurt. Go to the emergencies if you want to, but make sure you understand that by law you don't have the authority. I get the argument of that. I've been in the police car running with a lights and siren. I understand that. I don't have a big desire to do that anymore. But here's what happens in EMA with the way it's set up right now. Well, you may have Ronnie Dollar or Chris Judah that has a background, trained, but then you can go down here to Chris Ware in Butler County, that's the EMA director, that's never driven a car much over the speed limit. So you're gonna give her the authority to run lights and siren too. So that's the toss-up. I get your argument, but if we're gonna set it up and do it where we are right now, you have to be specific about who has the authority to do that. Are you gonna get somebody in trouble or killed? So I get it's a complex, the way it's created and evolved over the years. I will tell you this, I've been in a meeting in Montgomery where the director of public safety was called, and this was the discussion, and he himself said, I will oppose EMA ever having the authority to having license siren. That's where that's at.
But now they're declared a public safety agency by Alabama legislature. That nobody can define, okay, they're a public safety agency.
That didn't really do anything to that issue.
Right. And you got some idiot in the state of Alabama with Alabama legislature, ALEA, the whole organization, somebody named it emergency management. So what is emergency management? Is that emergencies that occur, it's a life or death situation when you need an ambulance, and somebody's got to oversee it, and you get too many. Headland does their thing, Abbeville does their thing, and again, I have a question: how did it ever become Headland and Abbeville's responsibility to cover the county outside the city limits?
The difference too about that, if we're talking law enforcement, is one thing. EMS is a different thing, because that ambulance can go out in the county and pick up a patient with insurance and get paid.
If the people are insured.
If they do, or Medicaid or Medicare, there's a 50-50 chance they'll get paid. Well, if that city of Headland police officer goes out there, he's not getting paid anything. So that makes it, in my mind, a little bit different. Not that they're obligated to go to, don't take that wrong, it's just that, and that's been some of the discussion is, let's figure out what it's costing you. What does it cost you to do that? Let us pay you for what it costs. We've just had trouble getting there.
And I'll say this, I was stupid and took over Cottonwood Rescue and thought in 24 months could get it in the black. No. I was behind the $5 tag fee for a Band-Aid because there'd never been funding for EMS. It's, you don't get paid and reimbursed on a lot of the calls that you go on because your demographics at Cottonwood, not being derogatory, is they don't have insurance. They don't have money. Then you get the call that you go out there to the 70-year-old that fell and got to do a lift assist and you can't bill that call. Or you get dispatched to a wreck and you get out there and there's nobody to transport, they refuse transport, you don't have a transport. So there's a lot of the transports that you don't get paid that you think you are going to, but as somebody who's gotten into it, Medicaid pays you $100 on a call. So there's a lot of obstacles that you think you're gonna get paid that you really don't get paid.
And that's why I said the plan is to every 2 years reevaluate, not stop funding within 2 years.
Right.
Nobody can afford to stop funding and the county not help and everybody not help each other.
So if all the parties get together January 10th, this should be resolved.
Absolutely, that's my main goal. It's been my main goal every month at every meeting. We just hadn't had a solid answer in order to, we've got resolutions ready. It's just a matter of being able to sign an actual agreement that's been agreed upon by all parties. And I'll say it again, without the quality of personnel that we have in the county right now, I don't know how to describe the mess we would be in. Everybody should thank all the personnel that we have because without them, we're doing it with 3 ambulances. That should tell everybody a lot. It should speak volumes.
Oh, I was sitting there when the school shooting came in at Headland, ready to help Headland start rolling ambulances, the city of Headland, the central dispatch, because if it had been an actual school shooting, you had 3 ambulances, and if Hellberg was able to get a crew, you'd have 4 ambulances of helping, which wasn't my job, but of knowing the resources that are available to start getting emergency units there. If, thank God, it was a false alarm.
Right.
But if it had been a real McCoy. And just like this morning at Wicksburg, a trailer truck wreck and several injuries, and Dothan had to come out. These emergencies don't make appointments.
I'm gonna say this too. I know Jason's kind of quiet and passive, but he's as committed to fixing this as anybody is. He works in it, he understands it better than I do. I'm not a paramedic. I've seen these things happen, but he's committed to fixing that. And I know that he caught a little bit of heat from, but he could, Jason's goal is to help fix this. And let's make sure we write on that date of that meeting. Is it the 5th or the 10th?
It's the 5th if everybody can agree on being open that day.
Is that a regular commission meeting, or that's just a meeting?
Trying to see, don't wanna violate the law by having too many people there, but the people that can have a conversation. And I don't care what happens on the 5th, until the city of Abbeville can come together and say, Henry County, pay us this is our agreement, we'll put this ambulance, you staff it, get responsive. Until they can get there with us, I don't know how we can give them money. That's just simply said. That's just not beating around the bush. And when they get there, we're ready to go. And I don't mean to be pushing it off on them, but that's where we are. I don't care who on the side of the street, what they tell you. That's where we are.
And they can't keep taking time because it could be you or I having a heart attack. It could be you or I having an emergency.
You speak to me living in Barber County, and when I lived on County Road 115 is when I first had a little bit of a heart problem. Not me having a heart attack in the middle of the night bothered me. It was me having that heart attack and my wife being there by herself and couldn't get anybody to come up there and help her. That really scares me. Well, I understand the problem outside of the city limits. So, man, we gotta fix that for the people. They're good people in Henry County. people that deserve a service like I've seen. I've seen an ambulance that better be there in 3 minutes with a paramedic in the back that knows what he's doing when he jumps on the ground. Those people deserve that too.
And that's the reason I mentioned EMA or oversight. You gotta have somebody kind of an oversight to kind of help make sure things are going and make sure you got the resources rolling that you need. And oftentimes, Ronnie and I were raised in law enforcement. Until my stint, and I started in 1977, until my stint with EMA, I never really realized the problems EMS and fire focus, because I've always been focused on law enforcement. Your communication centers are run by law enforcement officers. They train them for law enforcement. They never train them for fire and EMS. And there's a lot of obstacles, just like I said about mutual aid establishing the route. And I'm using Dothan, Houston County example. The way Dothan's coming in and that ambulance is gonna leave, or they're gonna meet, because oftentimes they don't meet because they go separate directions. Nobody manages that. When we were doing the $5 fee, I used the get out of the, somebody to get the ox out of the ditch, because people get offensive of, oh, he's gonna be in charge, oh, he's gonna be the battalion chief, or you gotta have somebody that's out thinking that emergency, not driving the ambulance and thinking, okay, I'm just walking in, somebody having a heart attack. It's what all resources are needed and how are we gonna get out of here? What do we need? Do we need survival flight? And I'm one of these, you roll based off what you're told. You don't get to the scene and then decide you need survival flight. You gotta go based off what you're told. So with that said, I guess the bottom line is the Henry County Commission is ready to fund and do something. The obstacle right now is the city of Abbeville and Abbeville Rescue coming together of who's in charge and which entity controls, because it's two separate entities.
Will they allow us to pay them to provide additional service to the people?
Headland's ready to go.
Headland's ready to go.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to address?
Help us provide the people with correct information.
I will.
Help me with that.
I will. And we can debate this, because some of them tell me I'm right, some of them, but we're not going to get
anything
the
I've
purpose.
said today. I'll prove it to you.
Okay. I will communicate with you. As you know, a lot of people come to me with the problems. I look at myself as I'm a can kicker to try to get the problem moving to get it solved, because every day is a ticking time bomb that nobody makes a scheduled appointment for an emergency.
Well, I don't disagree with you. Drop.
So I appreciate you. Appreciate y'all's time.
Okay.
Thank you.